Unaware his wife was about to win a $1 billion deal, husband humiliated her, calling her ugly at a party in front of his family. What she did next crushed him. He didn't just disrespect her. In a crowded living room glowing with warm lights and fake smiles, he looked straight at his own wife, and stripped her dignity in front of everyone who already thought she wasn't good enough for him. That night, Elena Bennett stood near the edge of her husband's family gathering. Dressed simply, quietly, carrying the kind of soft presence most people overlook. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, she wasn't the type Mark's family liked to brag about, but she was there, standing with a heart full of love, until she heard laughter rising from the center of the room. Mark Bennett, her husband, was surrounded by relatives. Wine glasses lifted, admiration poured over him like he was the star of the night. Beside him, a blonde woman in a fitted dress placed her hand on his arm. Jenna, the colleague who needed a ride. The woman wearing the same gold charm bracelet Elena had seen lying on Mark's desk upstairs not long before. Someone joked about Elena's simple style. Another called her plain. Elena waited, just once, for her husband to defend her. Instead, Mark laughed harder than all of them. Then he pointed directly at her and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Style? Elena? Come on, she's the ugliest woman here." The room erupted. His family laughed. The mistress smiled, then glanced at Elena, curious about how much this woman could take. And Elena stood there, quiet, not weak, not broken, just unbearably silent. Because while Mark mocked her in public, he had no idea where she had been in the last 24 hours. He didn't know about the private boardroom, the cameras, the executives, the billion-dollar papers she had already signed on behalf of her company. He didn't know a public announcement would go out the next morning with her name all over it. He didn't know the power she now held in her hands and what she had already started setting in motion. And later, in front of many of the same people who laughed at her, Elena Bennett would make a move that would crush his pride, end his lies, and rewrite her life forever. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you listen without subscribing, it's like letting Elena stand alone in that room again. When you click that button, you stand with every underestimated woman ready for her comeback. Subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. The tension in the boardroom could be felt the moment Elena Bennett stepped inside. At 34, she carried an aura that silenced even the most confident executives. Her dark hair framed a face that was calm, intelligent, and unreadable. The large glass table was covered in documents, contracts, financial statements, projections, all pointing toward one reality. She was minutes away from finalizing a $1 billion acquisition. On paper, it was a deal between two global companies. In practice, it would place Elena among the most influential businesswomen of her generation. But no one outside this room knew. Not her husband, not his family, not even the people who pretended to care about her. Elena's hand hovered above the final page. Her expression was steady, but inside a quiet storm moved. She had spent years building toward this milestone. Years of late nights, hidden meetings, and strategic calls she took in hallways so Mark wouldn't overhear how important she had become. She wasn't born into wealth. She grew up in a modest home, raised by a single father who ran a small repair shop. When Elena was 16, he passed away suddenly, leaving behind a box of unpaid bills, a few tools, and a single note he wrote long before he died. "Your mind will take you further than your circumstances ever can." That note was now folded inside her wallet, creased, worn, but protected like a treasure. After his death, Elena worked every job she could find, waitressing, tutoring, filing documents at a small law firm. She put herself through school, graduated early, and joined an energy tech startup where her strategic thinking quickly stood out. When the founder retired unexpectedly, he gave her a small portion of shares, nothing dramatic at the time, but Elena's decisions caused those shares to multiply in value over the years. Her reputation grew quietly. Investors started asking for her by name. When a major corporation wanted to acquire the startup, she was the one they insisted sit at the negotiating table. That was how she ended up here today, leading the final signing on behalf of her company. Her husband, Mark Bennett, had once admired that drive. Mark, now 36, worked in mid-level management at a modest marketing firm. When they met, he was charming, handsome, and eager to impress. He liked telling people his girlfriend was the smart one. But as time went on and her career began to outpace his, admiration slowly turned into resentment. His voice echoed in her memory, sharp, dismissive, unforgettable. If you ever out-earn me, this marriage is done. Men need to feel superior. He had said it 2 years earlier, after she received a surprise promotion. He laughed as if it were a joke, but the coldness in his eyes told her it wasn't. That was the moment Elena learned to hide her victories. The pen in her hand trembled slightly as another memory surfaced. Mark accusing her of acting too smart around his family. Mark rolling his eyes whenever she mentioned work. Mark insisting that women should know their place when men were talking. Those comments had once hurt her deeply. Now they fueled her. She signed the final page with steady grace. It was done. The deal was sealed. She had just become the leading force behind a billion-dollar acquisition, one that would shift the future of renewable energy across the nation. The formal announcement and press conference would happen the next morning, but legally the power was already in her hands. A soft chime interrupted the triumphant silence. Elena glanced at her phone. A new message flashed across the screen. From Margaret Bennett, Mark's mother. Where's something that hides your imperfections tonight? The whole family will be there. Elena froze for a second. There it was again, the reminder of the role Mark's family expected her to play. Margaret was 62, sharp-tongued, and obsessed with physical beauty. She often compared Elena to the women she believed were appropriate for her son. She had once told Elena, "A wife should be pretty first, smart second." The message stabbed her with a familiar sting. Elena inhaled slowly to steady her breath. But this time, something inside her didn't break. Something hardened. She placed her phone face down on the polished table and whispered to herself, barely audible, "Tonight will be different." The executives congratulated her, shaking hands unaware of the emotional battlefield inside her. She smiled politely, but her thoughts drifted toward the evening ahead. A family gathering, Mark's family, where she already knew she would be picked apart, judged silently and made to feel small. Except she wasn't small anymore. Not here, not on paper, not in reality. As she gathered the documents and placed them into her briefcase, a sudden chill moved through her. Not cold, but instinct. A whisper of something coming, something that would shift everything in her life, both professionally and personally. She paused at the doorway, fingers gripping the handle. The screen of her phone lit up again. Another message appeared before she even picked it up. This one made her eyebrows narrow. It was from Mark, short, sharp, and familiar. "Be on time tonight. Don't make me look bad." A faint tremor of warning tightened her chest, and quietly, subtly, the next storm in her life began to form. The instant Elena stepped through the doorway of Mark's family home that evening, the air hit her like a slap. Sharp, cold, and heavy with judgment. The chandelier above glowed brightly, but the house itself felt dim, as if the warmth had been drained long ago. Voices echoed from the living room, polished and loud, like a family trained their whole lives to sound more important than they truly were. The Bennetts were wealthy in their own minds, not in their wallets. They lived in a nice but overstretched house, cared about reputation more than reality, and valued appearance and hierarchy above kindness. Every gathering felt like a competition. Every comment hit a knife. Elena had barely taken 2 steps inside when Margaret Bennett appeared at the bottom of the staircase. Her eyes scanned Elena from head to toe, not with concern but with inspection, like a jeweler checking for cracks in a stone. "There you are," Margaret said, her voice smooth yet icy. "I was worried you'd show up wearing something distracting." Elena kept her expression neutral. She was used to this. Margaret always spoke in ways that sounded polite, but carried deep insult underneath. Margaret had built her entire identity around beauty and social standing. She spent most of her life judging women, ranking them silently, and teaching her sons that appearance was currency. She raised Mark with a rule. A man's worth is measured by the beauty of the woman beside him. Mark absorbed it like air. "Everyone's already here," Margaret added. "Don't wander off. Tonight is important for Mark. Tomorrow's dinner is about his big pitch." Elena said nothing. She knew the truth. Mark's big pitch at work was nowhere near the scale of the deal she had closed, but she also knew this family would rather celebrate an illusion around Mark than a reality around her. She followed Margaret toward the living room, her steps slow, controlled. The closer they got, the louder the voices became. Mark's father, Richard Bennett, tall, gray-haired, and as blunt as a hammer, sat at the head of the long dining table that connected to the living room area. He was a retired salesman who lied about his income, inflated every story, and believed his sons deserved perfect wives. He often ranked female relatives aloud during dinners, comparing who had aged well and who let themselves go. His sons grew up watching that like it was normal conversation. Next to him sat Mark's younger sister, Danielle, 32, sharp-boned and hungry for social status. Danielle treated every family event like a stage and every person like a prop. "Elena," Danielle called suddenly, her smile too wide. "You made it. I thought maybe you were still getting ready." A small laugh rippled around the room, quiet but intentional. Before Elena could respond, Richard spoke without looking at her. "Mark isn't here yet. He said he hoped you wouldn't slow things down tonight." The words carried a sting, but Elena's face stayed calm. Inside, though, something twisted. Mark's text from earlier, "Don't make me look bad," echoed in her mind. Memories from the early years of their marriage drifted in. Her first Thanksgiving with the Bennetts. Margaret whispering loudly to an aunt, "She's kind, but Mark deserves someone stunning." Her first Christmas, Richard telling Mark, "You should have married that blonde girl from your gym. Remember her? Beautiful girl." Her first anniversary dinner with them. Danielle smirking as she said, "Elena has a sweet face, but she isn't the type men brag about." Each memory carved a quiet wound inside Elena, wounds she covered with patience. She had tried defending herself once, but Mark later told her she was too sensitive in embarrassing him. That was the night she learned silence was safer around them. Still, she walked deeper into the house and took a seat near the edge of the room. Conversations swirled around her, shallow, biting, full of invisible claws. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You should smile more tonight. People forgive plainness if the person looks cheerful." Elena's jaw tightened gently. Plainness, imperfections, distractions. These were the words Margaret used instead of insults. The meaning was the same, but Elena no longer felt small under them. Not today. Not after signing a deal worth $1 billion. Not after securing a future where none of these people would have any financial power over her. As she sat there, Danielle rose halfway from her chair, whispering to an aunt nearby. The aunt, a short woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned closer. Danielle spoke softly, but not softly enough. "I wonder if Mark told her about the other woman yet." The aunt gasped. Elena's heart stopped. Her fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. She didn't breathe, didn't blink. The room moved around her, unaware that one sentence had just cut through her world like a blade. A chill swept through her, but her face stayed controlled. She had suspected something. She had felt Mark pulling away, but hearing it confirmed, out loud, hit her in a way she wasn't prepared for. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Danielle's next words were quieter. But Elena caught them. "She'll find out soon enough. Tonight might be interesting." A cold shadow fell across Elena's thoughts. She suddenly understood. Tonight was not just a family gathering. Something was coming. Something sharp. Something cruel. And somewhere in this house, the truth about this other woman was already closer than Elena realized. Upstairs, the noise from the living room softened into a low, distant hum. Margaret had turned one of the spare bedrooms into a small home office for Mark, calling it his space whenever he visited. It was the only room in the house where he could shut the door and pretend the rest of the family didn't exist. Now that door slammed shut. The sharp sound cut through the hallway, and Elena, who had stepped away from the crowd to catch her breath, flinched. She had come upstairs under the excuse of freshening up, but really she needed space after hearing Danielle's words about the other woman. As she reached the top of the stairs, she heard Mark's low voice through the office door. Tense, urgent, wrong. "No, don't worry," he whispered into his phone. "She won't say anything. She never does." The sentence hit Elena harder than she expected. She never does. That was how he saw her, silent, harmless, predictable. Elena took a step closer, then another. Inside the office, Mark stood with his back to the door, one hand on his laptop, the other gripping his phone. His shoulders were stiff, his words hushed and clipped. "Yes, tonight," he said. "Just look perfect, okay? I'll handle the rest." Before Elena could gather the strength to speak, his laptop chimed. Mark panicked and spun the screen away from the doorway. The movement was too quick to be casual. It was the reflex of a man caught. That was when Elena stepped inside. "Oh," Mark said, jerking around. His eyes widened, then narrowed into annoyance. "Why are you sneaking in like that?" Elena kept her voice steady. "I called your name twice. I didn't hear you." He snapped his laptop closed so fast the lid slammed. "You always walk in at the wrong time." A strange silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. Elena's gaze drifted over the desk, searching for a hint, anything to explain the uneasiness crawling through her. Then she saw it. A delicate gold charm bracelet lay on top of a stack of papers. Small, elegant, expensive. Nothing like the jewelry she wore. A tiny heart-shaped locket dangled from it. Her breath faltered. She had seen that bracelet design before, months ago at Mark's gym. A beautiful woman wearing it. Tall, toned, long golden hair, striking green eyes. The woman had laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that made people turn and stare. Elena remembered watching Mark look at her for a moment too long. At the time, she brushed it off. Now the bracelet sat in her husband's home office at his parents' house. "Where did that come from?" Elena asked quietly. Mark's jaw tightened. "It's nothing. Don't touch it." She didn't. She just stared at it, then back at him. Mark moved quickly, sweeping the bracelet into a drawer. "Go get ready for the party," he said, tone hard, "and try not to make things awkward tonight. My family's excited about my presentation tomorrow." Awkward, a sterile word for a man hiding another woman's jewelry. Elena stepped back, giving him space, but her thoughts spun. Danielle's whisper replayed in her mind. I wonder if Mark told her about the other woman yet. Earlier, Elena wanted to believe Danielle was just stirring trouble. Now, the truth pressed closer, heavy and undeniable. She reached for the door handle. Before she could open it, Mark's phone vibrated. His body stiffened again. He snatched the phone so fast he didn't realize he angled the screen slightly toward her. For a split second, barely a breath, Elena saw the message preview. "I'll see you tonight. Don't let your wife embarrass you again." The heart at the end burned into her memory. Mark jabbed his thumb against the screen to hide it. Too late. "Elena," he snapped, "mind your own business." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her legs felt heavy, rooted to the floor as her heart pounded against her ribs. Everything Danielle said, everything Mark denied, everything she tried not to see, it was real. And tonight, whatever he planned with that woman, whatever the bracelet represented, would play out while she was standing under the same roof. She walked out of the office without another word. Mark didn't follow. As she moved back down the hallway toward the stairs, the sounds from the living room grew louder. Laughter, clinking glasses, music. The house suddenly felt colder, sharper, each shadow holding a secret. Downstairs, Margaret's polished voice floated up, full of pride and control. The night was far from over. The humiliation had only begun. And somewhere on the main floor of the house, the woman behind that bracelet was about to step straight into Elena's line of sight. When Elena returned to the main room of the Bennett family party, the noise hit her like a wave. Loud laughter, clinking glasses, music thumping too hard, and voices layered with judgment. Eyes turned toward her instantly, not with warmth, but with curiosity sharpened like blades. The room sparkled with decorations rented to look expensive. Crystal-style glasses, glossy tablecloths, a floral centerpiece Margaret insisted they could barely afford but needed for status. Underneath the shine, everything felt cold. Margaret approached first, as if she were the hostess of a grand ball. At 62, she moved with stiff elegance, chin high, surveying people instead of greeting them. Her eyes swept over Elena's dress before she even offered a word. "Oh," Margaret murmured, lips tightening, "I thought you'd wear something more flattering." "That color isn't kind to your skin tone." No hello, no welcome, just critique. Elena simply nodded. She had expected this. Margaret believed beauty was a woman's only true value, and she never hid her disappointment that her son didn't marry someone she could parade around. Before Elena could respond, Mark's aunt Rebecca appeared at her side. Rebecca was in her late 50s, in a sparkly dress and cloud of perfume. She smiled, but it was thin and insincere. "Elena, dear," Rebecca said, leaning closer, "you should try a brighter lipstick, something to bring life to your face. You look so tired." Another dagger disguised as advice. Elena kept her breathing steady. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Then Mark's cousin, Tyler, a 30-year-old who thought his minor position at a car dealership made him important, joined the circle. He wasn't subtle. "So," Tyler asked, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "still working that little job of yours?" Elena met his eyes calmly. "Yes." She didn't mention the billion-dollar contract she signed that morning. She didn't mention the company she now partly controlled. She didn't explain that, on paper, she had more leverage than everyone in this room combined. Tomorrow they would all know. Tomorrow her silence would become the sharpest weapon she ever carried. But tonight, she stayed quiet. Voices swarmed around her, each conversation full of fake charm and hidden comparison. Every Bennett had grown up trained to criticize, compare, and rank. A flash of memory pulled her back. Years earlier, during her first Bennett family party, she had stood alone in a hallway after Margaret called her pretty in an ordinary way. Elena slipped into the bathroom to breathe, but the moment she locked the door, tears fell. She cried quietly, tiny, painful sobs that came from feeling like she wasn't enough. She remembered sitting on the edge of the tub, staring at herself in the mirror, wondering if she would ever be accepted. Wondering if Mark would ever stand up for her. Wondering if love meant being constantly measured like clothing on a rack. She had wiped her tears just seconds before Mark knocked on the door, asking her why she was making a scene. The memory stung even now, but this time no tears came. This time she stood taller. Elena moved to an empty corner of the room to breathe. Even there she felt their eyes on her. Judging, measuring. It didn't break her anymore. It only reminded her how far she had come without their approval. Tomorrow her life would shift. Tomorrow none of this would matter. Still, Danielle's earlier whisper crawled back into her mind. I wonder if Mark told her about the other woman yet. Fear slid through her bones. She laced her fingers together to keep her hands steady. Suddenly, the music lowered slightly, and heads turned toward the entrance hallway. A murmur swept through the guests. Elena's back stiffened before she even turned. The door opened. Mark walked in, wearing a confident smile, shoulders back, acting like he was the star of the night. But it wasn't his posture that made Elena's stomach twist. It was the woman standing beside him. Tall, blonde, striking, wearing a fitted black dress. Wearing a gold charm bracelet on her wrist. The same bracelet Elena had just seen upstairs. Mark placed a hand on the woman's back. Too familiar, too comfortable, and announced casually, "This is Jenna, a colleague who needed a ride." The room buzzed with interest, some relatives raising their brows, some glancing quickly at Elena. Jenna's eyes flicked to Elena with a small, knowing smile, soft but hiding something much deeper, a mix of curiosity and challenge. And in the space of a heartbeat, Elena understood one thing. Whatever humiliation was coming, this woman was part of it. The moment the guests circled around Mark, the energy in the room shifted like a sudden storm. Voices rose, glasses clinked louder, and every face turned toward him with admiration. Elena stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the man she once loved stand taller, laugh louder, and smile wider than he had in months, all while the blonde woman beside him glowed as if she belonged there. Jenna, the colleague he had brought as if it were nothing. The woman with the same bracelet Elena had seen in his office upstairs. Jenna didn't cling to Mark. Instead, she stood close enough to claim him, yet far enough to look innocent. Her eyes followed him with pride and secret satisfaction. Whenever he spoke, she tilted her head slightly, the way women do when they are charmed or in love. Most of the guests didn't notice the tension. They were too busy feeding Mark's ego. "This presentation you're preparing at work, brilliant move," his uncle said loudly. "Tomorrow's dinner will be your night." I knew you had potential all along, Margaret added quickly, as if she needed credit for his career. Mark soaked it in. Every compliment fueled him. He stood tall, chest out, one hand resting just behind Jenna's waist, close enough to guide her, far enough to pretend it meant nothing if anyone questioned it. Elena stayed quiet. She blended into the background the way she had trained herself to do in this house. But Jenna noticed her. Every few seconds, Jenna's sharp eyes cut toward Elena, studying her, as if trying to understand why Mark believed this woman would never leave. Then the first spark of humiliation flickered. Tyler, Mark's cousin, pointed toward Elena and joked, "Elena's always so simple. I guess some women don't try too hard." A few people laughed lightly, testing the waters. Elena held her breath. "Here it comes." Mark didn't defend her. He never did. But tonight, he went further. He laughed, loud, too loud. It wasn't his natural laugh. It was the laugh of a man performing for an audience, for a new woman. Jenna touched his arm gently. "Be nice," she whispered, smiling, but her eyes watched him carefully as if she wanted to see just how far he would go. Testing him, testing the marriage she hoped would break. Someone else chimed in. "Elena's style is understated." Another snickered. "Understated? She wears the same look every year." Mark smirked and glanced at Jenna, leaning closer to her than necessary, letting the crowd push him further. Then he said it, sharp, cruel, public. "Style? Elena? Come on, she's the ugliest woman here." The words dropped like a bomb. Silence swallowed the room for a heartbeat. Then laughter exploded. Louder, more careless than before. Some laughed because they agreed. Some laughed because they were afraid not to. Some laughed because the Bennetts were trained to treat cruelty as entertainment. Elena didn't laugh. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Her heart didn't shatter. It froze. Her face stayed calm, unreadable. Inside, though, something final snapped. A part of her that still believed this marriage could be saved turned to dust. Mark kept talking, feeding on the reaction. "I mean, look at her, standing there in that plain dress. No effort, no presence. Honestly, I don't know why she doesn't even try." The crowd roared again. Jenna didn't join in this time. Her smile faded. Her fingers slipped from Mark's arm. A trace of guilt or fear crossed her face. Not because she cared about Elena, but because she saw something in Elena's eyes she didn't expect. Not hurt, not tears, not panic. Silence. Cold, measuring silence. The kind of silence that made even Jenna take a small step back. Elena kept her gaze on Mark, her posture straight, her expression controlled. She looked like a woman observing a stranger, not a husband. A woman finally seeing clearly how small the person in front of her truly was. Her silence was more powerful than any slap, shout, or tear. Margaret rushed forward, trying to soften the moment. "Mark didn't mean it that way, Elena. You know how he jokes." Elena didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Mark laughed again, but this time the sound cracked. Something in her eyes unnerved him. For the first time in years, he felt smaller standing in front of her. She finally turned away, not slowly, not dramatically, but with quiet finality, as if a line had been drawn, and she knew she would never step back over it. Her heart was breaking, but her mind was waking up. She walked toward the far edge of the room where no one stood. Each step was steady, controlled, deliberate. Behind her, Mark's laughter died completely. Jenna's fingers nervously brushed the bracelet at her wrist. Something had shifted, something big, and deep inside Elena, beneath the hurt and the humiliation, a new thought appeared, small, sharp, unstoppable. This would be the last time they ever laughed at her like this. He didn't just disrespect her. He made sure the people who already thought she wasn't good enough finally had a reason to laugh. He thought she would break. He had no idea he just killed the last piece of her that still wanted him. Elena pushed the back door open so fast it slammed against the house, the sharp sound cutting through the night like a crack in glass. She stepped onto the patio, breath trembling, muscles tight, every nerve in her body buzzing with shock from Mark's public insult. The cool air wrapped around her, but it did nothing to calm the fire burning through her chest. Her vision pulsed, her ears rang, and for a moment she thought she might collapse under the weight of everything she had just endured. She gripped the edge of the wooden railing, grounding herself as the noise from inside faded into muffled echoes. The laughter, the mocking, the humiliation, it all crowded her mind like shadows trying to swallow her. Her heart didn't just hurt. Something inside her was cracking open. Slowly, the intensity softened, and the night grew quiet around her. The stillness gave space for a different kind of pain, one deeper than embarrassment or anger, the pain of remembering. Memories rushed through her like waves breaking. She saw herself sitting alone at a restaurant 2 years ago, dressed beautifully, waiting for Mark to arrive for their anniversary dinner. She had booked his favorite place. She waited for an hour before he finally sent a short text. "Busy, we'll do it next week." She remembered the way her hands shook as she folded the menu closed, forcing a smile at the waiter, pretending she wasn't hurt. Another memory surfaced, a backyard barbecue with Mark's coworkers. She had been excited, ready to support him, ready to show she was proud of him. But when she tried to join a discussion about a campaign idea, Mark placed his hand firmly on her shoulder and whispered sharply, without even looking at her, "Let the men talk." The shame she felt that day burned like a fresh wound even now. Another memory followed, standing in Mark's office as he introduced her to a coworker. "This is my wife," he said with an awkward laugh. "She's average, but she has a good heart." He didn't notice how her smile faltered. He never noticed anything that hurt her. And then the memory that felt like betrayal in its purest form. The night she secretly paid off his business debt. He had come home angry, blaming his boss, the economy, his bad luck, even hinting that her energy was holding him back. He never once blamed his own choices. She used her savings, money she had earned from quiet consulting jobs on the side. Mark never thanked her. He didn't even ask how the debt disappeared. He just assumed someone finally recognized his potential. Each memory linked to the next like a chain, proof that tonight was not an isolated cruelty, but the final blow in years of disrespect. Elena's breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied, her tears dried before they could fall. She wasn't breaking. She was changing. Through the reflection of the glass door, she caught a glimpse of movement inside. Curious, she stepped closer to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the frame. Mark stood with Jenna, his so-called colleague, near the drink table. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed for a married man. Jenna leaned in, whispering something. Mark chuckled softly, then said words that sliced through Elena like a blade. "She won't leave. She knows no one else would want her." Jenna giggled, brushing her hair back proudly, as if she had already taken Elena's place in his life. Elena didn't gasp, didn't cry, didn't flinch. She simply stilled. Her fingers loosened on the frame. Her shoulders straightened. Her heartbeat calmed into something cold and focused, like a flame dying and turning into stone. In that quiet moment, something inside her shut off completely. Not weakness, not fear, but the part of her that still believed he loved her. She turned away from the window slowly, her face unreadable, her eyes empty of the woman she had been minutes earlier. A new version of Elena was forming, quiet, calculating, and dangerously calm. And deep inside her, a plan, small but growing, took its first breath. She would not scream. She would not beg. She would not fight him on his family's turf. If he wanted a stage, she would choose a bigger one. Elena gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened under the passing streetlights. She pulled out of the Bennett family driveway with a speed she never used before. Her chest was tight, her breath sharp, her mind racing so fast it felt like it might tear apart. The humiliation, the bracelet, the phone message. Mark's voice whispering, "She won't leave." Jenna's smug smile, his family laughing. Each moment hit her like a fresh blow. The road ahead was almost empty. The night outside was silent, but inside her car, everything was loud. Every heartbeat, every memory, every shattered piece of her trust. Yet as the minutes passed, something unexpected began to happen. The intensity faded. The panic quieted. Her thoughts sharpened into calm, cold clarity. She wasn't driving aimlessly. She was heading toward her office, the one place untouched by Mark's influence, the one space where she held complete control. When she stepped inside the empty building, the soft hum of the security system greeted her. She swiped her access card, the door unlocked with a familiar click, and she walked through the quiet hallway, her heels tapping a steady rhythm. No shaking, no hesitation. Not anymore. She entered her office and closed the door gently. The space was bright, clean, and organized, a physical reflection of her mind when she wasn't under attack. Elena sat at her desk and opened her laptop. This wasn't the first time she suspected Mark of cheating. For months, she sensed something wrong. Changes in his routine, half-explained networking dinners, his phone always face down, sudden late nights that never matched his actual workload, but tonight had confirmed everything, and that was why she had planned ahead. The viewers didn't know it yet, not even Mark, but Elena had been preparing for this moment long before the humiliation at the party. Months ago, when she first sensed Mark's dishonesty, she began documenting everything. Strange receipts, unexplained charges, transferred funds, phone logs and call times, overheard conversations, and every disrespectful comment he made in public. She stored it all safely, backed up, time-stamped, organized. Tonight, she finally opened those folders. Her movements were controlled and precise. She dragged files into a secure drive, screenshots of messages she had glimpsed on his phone, voice memos of his condescending remarks. The bank notice revealing Mark used her credit without telling her. She had once co-signed a loan believing it was for home improvements, only to later discover it funded his failing side business. His little firm he bragged about to everyone. She uploaded every document into a folder labeled Final, Legal. Then she picked up her phone and messaged Lydia, her best friend and longtime confidant. Lydia was 35, a paralegal who had grown up with Elena and one of the few people she trusted completely. Within seconds, Lydia called. "Elena, are you okay? Your message scared me." Elena's voice was calm, level. "I'm done, Lydia." There was a small pause. Lydia understood instantly. "Are you sure?" Elena looked at the glowing computer screen, at the mountain of evidence, at the betrayal laid out in cold, hard facts. She thought of Mark's voice, mocking her. She thought of his family laughing. She thought of the way he touched Jenna, like Elena wasn't even there. "He taught me to be quiet," she said softly. "Now he'll learn to listen." Lydia exhaled, steady and protective. "I'll connect you to the lawyer. You remember Attorney Graves?" Elena nodded, even though Lydia couldn't see it. Graves was the lawyer she had quietly met once, months ago. Just in case. Efficient, sharp, and fiercely protective. Minutes later, a message pinged. It was from Attorney Graves. "Received all materials. Everything is ready. Do you want to serve the papers tonight or tomorrow?" Elena stared at the message, her heartbeat steady, her hands calm. Tomorrow. Tomorrow would hurt him the most. Tomorrow the Bennetts would see the truth. She didn't type the word. Her silence was the answer. Graves already knew what that meant. As the screen dimmed, another notification appeared at the top of her phone. A new message. From an unknown number. She opened it. "You don't know me, but I'm Jenna. I didn't know he would humiliate you like that. He told me your marriage was over and that you were using his name to get business deals. If you ever need proof of what he said about you, I have the messages." Elena's eyes narrowed. Her breath caught, but not from pain this time. From confirmation. Jenna had just handed her something priceless. Evidence from the other side of the affair. Elena saved the number under Jenna Proof, took a screenshot of the message, and dropped it into the same folder. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. Her plan was no longer just growing. It was taking shape. The flash of cameras exploded like lightning the moment Elena walked onto the stage. The late morning air inside the grand conference hall vibrated with reporters shouting her name, microphones rising toward her like a forest of steel. Executives in dark suits stood behind her, watching with respect, waiting for her to take her place at the center of the long glass table. This was not just another meeting. This was not just another contract. This was Elena Bennett's moment of power. The public signing and announcement of the $1 billion acquisition, a deal powerful enough to reshape an entire industry, a deal she built in silence while her husband mocked her, a deal she carried alone, through late nights, hidden meetings, and endless doubt. Flash, flash, flash. Each camera captured the version of Elena she had always known herself to be. Strong, sharp, controlled. Not the plain woman Mark and his family described. Not the average wife they pretended she was. The crowd settled, and the CEO of the partnering corporation stepped forward. A tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a deep voice, he addressed the room. Today marks a historic moment, and it could not have happened without the extraordinary vision and leadership of Elena Bennett. Applause thundered like a wave. Elena didn't blink. She didn't beam. Inside, her emotions surged like fire, but her face remained calm, still, untouchable. She took her seat at the table, pen in hand, the ceremonial copies of the documents laid out before her. These weren't the legal originals that had been signed in private the day before, but they were proof to the world, proof of every sacrifice she made, every insult she endured in silence. Every night she stayed up working while Mark belittled her achievements. This was why she had stayed quiet at the party. This was why she hadn't reacted to Mark's cruelty. This was why she had walked away instead of screaming. Because today, she would rise higher than any of them could have imagined. With a steady breath, she signed the final page. A billion-dollar future, sealed again, but this time, in front of the world. The hall erupted. Cheers, applause, flashing lights. Elena stood and shook hands with each executive, accepting their congratulations with measured grace. And miles away, in the home he still believed they shared, Mark Bennett stared at his phone in shock. He had woken up expecting control, expecting to feel superior after putting her in her place in front of his family. Instead, his phone buzzed with news alerts. Local businesswoman leads $1 billion energy tech acquisition. Meet Elena Bennett, the new power player in renewable energy. Who is the woman behind this historic deal? Mark's face drained of color. His hands shook. His breathing tightened. He clicked a video, and there she was, his wife, looking powerful and composed, surrounded by the most influential people in the industry. The same woman he had called the ugliest woman here just hours earlier. The same woman he assumed would never leave him. His heart pounded with a mix of fear, regret, and disbelief. Beside him, his phone buzzed again with a new message. It was from Jenna. "You didn't say she was this important. I can't be part of this mess." Mark typed quickly, "Jenna, wait." Before he could finish, another message appeared. "Don't contact me again." Then he saw it, the small word beneath her name, blocked. His chest tightened, not because Jenna left, but because the woman he expected to cling to him, the woman he dismissed and insulted, had become someone powerful enough to destroy him without raising her voice. He stood abruptly, knocking over a glass on the counter. Panic surged through him. If Elena was capable of something this massive, what else had she prepared? What else did she know? What else was she planning? He rushed to get dressed, hands shaking as he pulled on a suit. He needed to get to the formal dinner event his family had planned for that evening, the one where he was supposed to talk about his big pitch at work. He needed to do damage control fast. If Elena showed up there with this news, if she told anyone what he had done, his stomach twisted violently. He grabbed his keys and bolted for the door, his mind spinning, fear clawing at his throat. He had humiliated her publicly. Now she had the power to return that humiliation 1,000 times over. And she wasn't done. Not yet. Because as Elena left the press conference, her eyes calm and focused, her phone buzzed with a message from her lawyer. "Everything is ready for the final step. I'll meet you at the dinner tonight, as discussed." Elena looked at the message, then stepped into the waiting car. The storm she was about to unleash had only begun. The doors to the elegant dinner hall slammed open so hard that every head snapped toward the entrance. Mark Bennett rushed inside, chest heaving, tie crooked, fear shaking through his entire body. His eyes darted across the room, searching desperately, almost wildly for one face. Elena. The event was already in full motion. Lights dim, music soft, guests in formal wear. The Bennetts gathered proudly around the long table, ready to celebrate what they believed was Mark's big business pitch and up-and-coming success. But Mark knew this wasn't a normal night. Not anymore. Not after the world had learned exactly who his wife truly was. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the greetings thrown his way. "There you are, Mark," Margaret called, unaware of the storm inside her son. "We've been waiting for you. Your big speech—" "No," Mark muttered, voice cracking. "Where is she?" His sister Danielle frowned. "Who? Elena? Why? What's wrong with—" He spun around sharply. "Is she here or not?" His desperation drew whispers. Faces turned to each other. Something wasn't right. Something was breaking. Before anyone could answer, the room fell into silence. Because at that very moment, Elena walked in. She entered with calm, unhurried steps, dressed in an elegant black suit that wrapped around her like armor. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes steady. Behind her walked Attorney Graves, her lawyer, mid-40s, sharp eyes, posture commanding. The moment Graves stepped inside, it was clear he wasn't here for dinner. He was here for business. Serious business. The entire Bennett family fell silent, confusion mixing with unease. "Elena," Margaret forced a smile. "Why the serious entrance? This is Mark's night, dear." Elena didn't respond to her. She didn't respond to anyone. She stepped forward, her heels clicking like measured strikes on the polished floor. The room held its breath as she faced Mark, who looked as though his world was falling apart at her feet. "Elena," Mark whispered, voice trembling. "We need to talk. Please. I swear, I didn't—" She raised her hand. He stopped speaking instantly. Attorney Graves opened a folder, thick, heavy, prepared long before tonight. "Elena Bennett," Graves announced with clear authority, "wishes to address the family before dinner begins." Margaret blinked in confusion. "Address? Address what?" Elena reached into the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. She placed them on the table in front of Mark, quietly, calmly, mercilessly. Mark looked down, and his face turned white. They were divorce papers, served publicly, in front of everyone he had spent years trying to impress. Gasps echoed around the table. "What is this?" Richard barked, grabbing the top pages. His eyes scanned the evidence attached, screenshots of messages between Mark and Jenna, financial statements showing hidden spending, loan documents co-signed by Elena, proof the loan funded his failing side business, not their home, voice recordings of his insults and belittling comments, Jenna's own written message offering proof of his lies, everything. Elena spoke, her voice steady. "You said I wouldn't leave. You were wrong." The room froze. Mark's breathing hitched. "Elena, wait. Please, don't do this here." She held his gaze without blinking. "Here is exactly where this belongs." Danielle covered her mouth. Margaret stumbled back against a chair. Richard stared at his son with raw disgust. Near the entrance, Jenna, who had slipped into the hall unnoticed, hoping to quietly support Mark, stopped dead. She saw the lawyer. She saw the papers. She saw screenshots with her own name and words. She turned, panic flashing across her face. "Don't worry," Elena said without fully turning around, her voice cool. "You won't need to stay long." Jenna's cheeks flushed with shame. She spun and hurried out, her heels clicking in quick, guilty steps. Elena returned her attention to Mark. "You humiliated me in front of your family," she said. "I'm returning the favor, in front of yours." Mark dropped to his knees, the papers shaking in his hands. "Elena, please, I can change." "You already did," she replied, "into someone I no longer recognize." Attorney Graves stepped forward. "All evidence has been filed. Mr. Bennett, you'll receive court dates and further instructions. I recommend you read everything carefully before you respond." Margaret burst into tears. Richard stormed out of the room, face red with anger, not at Elena, but at the son who ruined the family's image. Danielle stared at Mark like he was a stranger. Elena turned away from him, her expression calm but final. She had crushed him, not with screams, not with revenge rumors, but with the truth he thought she would never use. As she walked out of the hall, her phone buzzed again. A new message. From the same number saved as Jenna Proof. "There's something else you need to know before this is over." Elena paused for just a moment. Something else. Something more. The final piece of the story was still waiting. The sound of a door slamming echoed through Mark Bennett's small rented apartment, so loud it bounced off the bare walls like a final announcement of his collapse. He stood alone in the dim living room, surrounded by scattered papers, unpaid bills, and the distant hum of a city that no longer cared who he was. The once confident man now shook as he stared at his phone, hoping desperately that Elena might respond. She didn't. She hadn't for weeks. Everything in his life had fallen apart since the night she served him divorce papers in front of his family. Outside his circle of chaos, Elena Bennett stood in her new apartment. Clean, bright, peaceful. The window stretched wide, letting soft morning light spill across the room. Plants stood neatly in corners. A new laptop rested on a simple wooden desk. Her favorite books lined the shelves. It wasn't luxury, it wasn't excessive, but it was hers, her space, her peace. She moved quietly through the apartment, watering a plant near the window, her expression calm, her posture relaxed. There were no voices criticizing her now, no mother-in-law judging her clothes, no cousin mocking her job, no husband belittling her existence. Just quiet, just air she could finally breathe. Her life had changed more in 3 weeks than in the last 3 years. The pieces connected now, every insult, every sacrifice, every late night at work while Mark rolled his eyes, and the clarity felt like freedom. After the dinner hall confrontation, she had moved out within days. Her new place was small but paid for with her own money, not a shared account. The lawyer had filed every document. Jenna's follow-up message, the something else she mentioned, turned out to be screenshots showing how Mark had tried to use Elena's name and connections to attract investors to his failing side business, while calling her boring and lucky to have him behind her back. Elena forwarded the messages to Graves, not out of spite, but to make the legal record complete. And while she rebuilt, Mark crumbled. News articles appeared everywhere. Mark Bennett loses support after wife's $1 billion deal. Investors pull out of Bennett's side venture, following misconduct allegations. Elena Bennett's leadership attracts new partnerships. The few small investors who had backed Mark's side company stepped away and moved to work with Elena's firm or its partners instead. They trusted her intelligence, her character, her record. They wanted nothing to do with a man exposed for financial dishonesty and emotional abuse. His employer at the marketing firm quietly moved him out of client-facing work. They didn't want their name attached to the scandal. His big pitch vanished before it ever made it to the boardroom. His family, desperate to protect their image, stepped away from him as well. Margaret stopped answering his calls. Richard told friends that Mark had lost his mind and ruined the Bennett name. Danielle deleted every photo that included him and pretended online that she had always supported Elena. He was alone, not because Elena left, but because his own actions finally had consequences. And the mistress? Jenna was photographed online with a new wealthy man only days after Elena's press conference. A real estate investor, according to the caption. She didn't hide. She didn't explain. She didn't care. One headline read, Jenna Cole seen with real estate investor, moving on quickly. Mark had lost her too. Now all he had left were the apologies he posted online. Long, emotional, and soaked in excuses. I made mistakes. I didn't value my wife the way I should have. I regret everything. Please forgive me. People didn't believe him. People didn't care. People only cared about Elena, the woman he tried to break, who rose higher than he ever imagined. And today, Mark tried one last time. One last desperate message. Elena's phone buzzed on her table as she carried a stack of fresh documents to her small home office corner. She paused, looked at the screen, saw his name. Mark Bennett. One new message. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. She didn't feel the old hurt. She tapped the message open for a single glance. It was long, painfully long. Mark begged. He apologized. He claimed he still loved her. He said he didn't deserve her, but he wanted another chance. He wrote paragraphs of regret, fear, and loneliness. It ended with, I know I can change. Just please talk to me. Please. Elena stared at the message for 3 quiet seconds. Then she pressed delete. Just like that. No hesitation. No second thought. Her past didn't control her anymore. She walked to her balcony, opened the door, and let the warm air hit her face. Somewhere deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, strength, self-worth. She didn't rise to prove Mark wrong. She rose because she finally realized her worth never needed his approval in the first place. Elena stepped back inside, ready to open a new document on her laptop. Plans for a scholarship fund in her father's name, a project to help young people like she once was, a new chapter, a new purpose. And just as she placed her phone down, a soft smile touched her lips. What waited for her next would be even brighter. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.